මම කැලණිය විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයේ ගණකාධිකරණ අධ්‍යනාංශයේ කතිකාචාර්යවරියක් විදිහට කටයුතු කරනවා. මම විශ්වවිද්‍යාල අධ්‍යාපනය ලැබෙන කාලයේදීම CMA කළමනාකරණ ගණකාධිකාරී පාඨමාලාව හැදෑරුවා. ඒ මාගේ ජීවිතයේ සාර්ථකත්වයට මහඟුවත් වැලක් වුණා. ඒ නිසා දූල පුතාලටත් මම ආරාධනා කරනවා CMA කළමනාකරණ ගණකාධිකාරී පාඨමාලාව තෝරාගෙන ඔබගේ ජීවිතයත් ජය ගන්න කියලා.
ලෝහ පිළිගත් කළමනාකරණ ගණකාධිකාරීවරයෙකු වීමට පාර්ලිමේන්තු පන්තින් සංස්ථාපනය කරන ලද ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ එකම කළමනාකරණ ගණකාධිකාරී ආයතනය CMA ශ්‍රී ලංකා ඔබේ අනාගත ජයග්‍රහණයට.
අයිබෝන් දුවේ පුතේ. In this session we will be discussing the interaction between business and the government. Now you know across the world many countries they have different type of economies called capitalist economies, socialist economies, mixed economies, like different kind of economies. But in all economies, even if it a free economy, there is a role for the government. That means to a certain extent government intervene in an economy. The need of government in business sector is the main focus in this topic. You know this is the third topic in your A-level syllabus. So government time to time intervene into the smooth function of an economy in order to ensure the economic growth and stability, and to regulate certain economic activities or to promote some economic activities, and also to protect consumers, and as well to promote producers, to maximize or to ensure the social welfare. So for those purposes, government intervene in an economy. So we will be discussing that role in this session. So first we'll discuss the government intervention in businesses. So as I mentioned earlier, government intervene businesses in several ways. Because you know without a good government support, firms cannot run their businesses successfully. It's very, very important. And also there is a role for government in order to ensure a healthy economic and business environment by providing proper legal framework, infrastructure facilities, then healthy government policies. So all these interventions are done by the government of an economy. So it's the government responsibility. So regarding the government intervention in an economy, government consists of three main governing bodies: central government, provincial government, and local authorities. Local authorities, it comprises of urban councils, town councils, and as well municipal councils. So we'll discuss how the government mainly these three intervention or these three governing bodies, central government, provincial governments, and other local authorities intervene into the business sector and its functions. Now as I mentioned, government intervene to the business sector in different ways. You can see here the government intervene into the business sector by providing infrastructure facilities. Because you know in an economy, infrastructure facilities like development of roads, constructions of road, constructions of bridge, constructions of several buildings, all these activities are done by the government. It's the ultimate responsibility of a government. Then by being a competitor, in certain industries, government is also a competitor. Now say for example, in the telecommunication industry and in the TV radio channels. Now you know government in Sri Lanka, government has 2 TV channels and 1 radio channel. So in that case, government is a competitor. And in the retail is a competitor. And also government intervene into the business sector by being a customer. In certain industries, in certain scenarios, government play the customer role as well. Now, for example, in the agricultural sector, government is one of the main important customers. We know government buy paddy and harvest from farmers, because one of the main objectives of a government is to protect both consumers as well as producers. Now, you know, these days we experience this importance of government role, particularly in agricultural sector, regarding fertilizers, the harvesting, all these things. These days we experience this, and also providing defense services. So government plays the customer role. And by formulating policies, very, very important. For the better function of an economy, you know, we need policies. In an organization, they have their own policies. So in your schools, you have your own policies. Like for a government, we should have to have good policies for the betterment of the economy. So the ultimate responsibility of formulating good policies for the government is lie on the government. For the economy, it's lie on the government. And by imposing rules and regulations, it's very, very important, because for the betterment of a country, we should have to have a good legal framework. For the business sector, we should have to have a good legal framework. And for the economy, we should have to have a good legal framework. So everywhere we should have to have a legal framework. And finally, by being a tax collector. Now, you know, for the government spending, the main income source is the country's tax. So on behalf of the දිනුක ඒක ගන්න ඕනේ අපහු. හරි. Then finally, by being a tax collector. Now, you know, government has the responsibility of collecting tax. The main income source of the government is the tax revenue. So these are the ways, or this is how government intervene into the economy and the business sector. Now, just see an example. Now, I told you that there are 3 governing bodies in the Sri Lankan context. Government means it has 3 governing bodies: the central government, provincial council, and local authority. So one of the main influence in the business sector by the government is to provide necessary infrastructure facilities. Now we'll see how these different authorities intervene into the business sector just to provide infrastructure facilities. Now if we consider the central government is responsible of providing electricity. The providing electricity is the responsibility of the central government. It's not the responsibility of either provincial councils or the local authorities. Now regarding the provincial councils, the maintaining of roads is the responsibility of a provincial councils. It's the responsibility of provincial councils. Then what about local authorities? Maybe town councils, municipal councils, urban councils. So collecting waste and garbage from residents or other parties, it's a responsibility of local authorities. When businesses know that they are monitored and facilitated by the government, they act accordingly and make sure not to engage in frauds and errors. So that's why the government intervention is very, very important. Now, when businesses know that they are monitored, they are facilitated by the government, so always businesses like to get registered their businesses. It's one of the essential condition. So registering businesses is very, very important for the betterment of the country. So it's benefit for the businesses as well as it benefit for the customers as well. And you know, the smallest unit of an economy is the household. If a couple is get married, so we always register our marriage because just to provide a legal framework. Now you know, in any school there is a legal framework. In an economy there is a legal framework. For businesses we have a legal framework. So everywhere we need to have a good legal framework. So that legal framework is provided by the registration of a business. So if we have registered businesses in an economy, so it's good for the economy. That means we are having a healthy economy. And also this intervention, government intervention and the registration of businesses will eventually enhance the goodwill of a business. So we always like to deal with a business or a company that is having a good goodwill. And also, if this interaction is strong between the government and the businesses, so ultimately it will contribute to development of the country. So both has a positive interaction. They help each other. The government sector help the business sector, and business sector do their responsible for the country and the government on the other way. So ultimately it will contribute to development of the country and also receiving the acceptance of the government and public. So these are the important government intervention in businesses. Then we move to the second subtopic of the topic, that is the role of business and economic aims of government. Now so far we discussed how government can contribute to the business sector and for their development. Now we will be discussing how the business sector can contribute to the development of the country and the government. Now before discuss the intervention of businesses in the government or the interaction between businesses and the government, we'll first discuss the important economic aims of the government. Important economic aims of the government. Right? Therefore, here we discuss how business contribute to achieve these economic aims of the government. Now, if we consider an economy, government, as I mentioned earlier, government has a significant role. Now, for any economy, they have certain objectives to be achieved. One of the most important objectives of an economy is to achieve economic growth and development. So it's the main economic objective of any economy or of any country, to achieve economic growth and the development. Development, you know, includes not only the GDP, higher GDP per capita, but also other aspects of human lives. The health, education, like, and full employment. The second main objective is to achieve full employment. But here full employment mean not the 100% full employment, because any economy, any developed economy, at the given period of time there is a 1 to 2% of unemployment rate or less than 5% unemployment rate. For the most developed country, the situation is same due to several reasons. So full employment, that means we as economy should try to minimize the unemployment level as much as possible. And economic stability. Economic stability is very, very important these days. We are very concerned about this economic stability. Everywhere across the world, people talk about economic stability because with this COVID pandemic, you know, we all face an economic downturn, economic crisis. So the economic stability matters a lot. Economic stability means the ability to control the price, ability to maintain constant prices. Then fair income distribution. It's really important. It's really important because it doesn't matter the per capita GDP. That per capita GDP or the GDP or the national income should be equally distributed among the citizens of that country. Equally in the sense we cannot equally distribute the income, but we should try to minimize the inequality. We should try to minimize the income inequality. Now, for example, if we consider developing countries, less than 20% of the population holds more than 80% of wealth. It's a common fact in many developing countries. So, it's very unfair. Less than 20% of the population holds more than 80% of the national income. So, it's very unfair. But in many developed countries, they anyway control the situation. And favorable international trade. You know, none of the country can function isolation. So, we have to engage with external trade as well, international trade as well, because in a country we cannot produce all what we need. Therefore, we have to engage in both import and export activities. So, that matters a lot for the balance of payment. So, if we deal with the foreign countries, if we engage in international trade, so it does not harm the country's economy, country's political environment and country's socio and cultural environment. And on the other hand, engaging in international trade should improve the living standard of people. So, the benefit should be for the both parties and mainly it does not harm to the country from any aspect. Now, we will see how or in which ways businesses can contribute to achieve these economic aims that I mentioned earlier. So, one of the main important responsibilities of business sector is to pay their relevant taxes on time. Pay relevant taxes on time. So, it is the most important responsibility of the business sector because you know the main income source of government revenue is the tax income. So, it's the most important responsibility of the business sector. And use of indigenous resources. Now, if we run a business, we always have responsibility to buy the domestic resources, so domestic goods and services rather than importing the raw materials or whatever the resources we need. So, importing resources means outflowing of our income. So, we should encourage the domestic businesses. Therefore, as responsible business people, we should buy the relevant resources and raw materials from the indigenous businesses or domestic businesses. And as responsible business, we should adhere to the government rules, regulations and policies. Now, these days we are experience these things. So, when government impose several policies, rules, so as people as good citizens of the country, we should adhere them. Now with this pandemic situation, you know, even if it is not directly related to the business environment, so there are certain health guidelines that we should follow. Wearing a mask, sanitizing hands, or like. So the business people, so with the COVID pandemic, they have to follow several policies to the health conditions of the country, of people and the country. Right? So time to time, government impose several rules, regulations. So as responsible business people, we have to follow them. And generating new employment opportunities. Now you know, unemployment rate is a bit higher in our country. So if businesses, the private sector, can generate more employment opportunities, so it will lead to decrease the unemployment level of the country. So it's a responsibility of the business sector. Rather than just focusing on technology intensive mechanisms or processes, they can more focus on labor intensive mechanisms or processes. So it will increase the economic status of the country, or it will lead to decrease the unemployment level of the country and minimize damages to the environment. So when we run a business, there are certain negative consequences to the environment. So we as responsible businesses should minimize these damages to the environment, because environment protection is one of the major concerns in the world today. With the increased global warming and in the sustainable development goals, so protecting environment is one of the important goals. So it's very important. And avoid corruption. We as responsible business people should not engage in corruptions. So corruption is now everywhere. We should not do business that promote corruptions. So we should do business with good faith and encouraging fair trade. It's really important. We should engage in business with good faith as I mentioned. So thus it encourages fair trade. The businesses should benefit for the customers as well as producers. So as we discussed, one of the most important intervention of the government is to formulate policies. Now regarding the government policies, there are two types: monetary policies and fiscal policies. Monetary policies are set by the central bank of the country, and fiscal policies are set by the government, including that three governing bodies as we discussed earlier. Now monetary policy refers to the money supply and the interest rate of the economy, and fiscal policies refers to the government spending and revenue and tax policy. So we will see the two policies one by one. Starting with the fiscal policies. So fiscal policies are very, very important. So fiscal policies refers to the use of government taxation, spending and borrowing to keep the economy stable. Government use their taxes or the tax revenue, spending and borrowing to smooth function of the economy. Now the formulating fiscal policies, the main aim of formulating fiscal policies is to protect the macroeconomic stability. Macroeconomic stability. Now regarding the macroeconomic stability, as we discussed, any economy or any country has its own economic objectives like achieving higher economic growth development, achieving full employment, maintaining economic stability, like these are economic or macroeconomic priorities of any economy. So maintain or minimize the inflation. So these are macroeconomic priorities of any economy. So to protect this macroeconomic stability, the government use its revenue, tax, spending and borrowings. So related policies, what policies government can formulate to make the economy stable. Now we will see these one by one. Now you know, we as citizens are interested in annual budget proposals, because we know annual budget proposals are very familiar to us. So we are looking, every year we are looking for it. So what government is going to, or how government is going to uplift the standard of living of the citizens. So we are really worried about that. Therefore, we are very, very interested in annual budget. So what proposals the government bring to the table? So these proposals are all fiscal proposals. Therefore, government budget proposal reflect its fiscal policy. Now regarding the fiscal policy, now I told you that fiscal policies are related to government spending and revenue and expenditure. Regarding the government revenue, it's two types: revenue receipts and capital receipts. And regarding the public expenditure, again two types: revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. We will be discussing these in detail in coming slides. And the revenue, government revenue, again are two types: tax revenue and non-tax revenue. Tax revenue again is two types: the direct tax and the indirect tax. So we will discuss this breakdown separately. First, the business government revenue. Government revenue, as I told you, it's two types: tax revenue and the non-tax revenue. The tax revenue is the very, very important and the main income source of the government. Tax revenue. It's not the scenario, not only the scenario in Sri Lanka, in everywhere, in every country, the main income revenue source of the country is its tax revenue. Now you know, we as citizens, we as consumers, we as business people have to pay several taxes. You may have heard about these taxes. Different types of taxes like income taxes, maybe corporate taxes, value added taxes called VAT, and excise tax like import tax, custom tax, different types of taxes. So basically there are many types of taxes, but here I have mentioned few of them, the commonly used tax rates. Income tax. Now you know income tax. The examples for income taxes are the payee tax, the corporate tax, the tax imposed on income. Then value added tax, we call it VAT. VAT, this is a tax on added value. On added value on wholesale or retails. Tax on added value of wholesales and retails. Then excise tax. Excise tax means tax on liquor and tobacco products. And custom duties. If we import certain items, say for example vehicles, so we have to pay tax for the government. So it's called the custom duties or custom tax. And several other taxes are also there, like telecommunication tax, maybe nations building tax. So several taxes are there. Annually, these taxes, time to time, the Inland Revenue on behalf of the government change these tax policies. So it's happened. They change the tax rate, they may change the tax rate, they may hold several taxes, they may introduce new taxes, like. Then the tax regarding the tax revenue, it's two types: direct tax revenue and indirect tax revenue. Now, direct tax revenue means the tax charged on income and assets of businesses. And direct tax has to be paid by the relevant party itself. Now, if I'm a taxpayer, income taxpayer, so I have to pay directly my tax to the Inland Revenue. So I'm a direct taxpayer there. So in contrast, indirect tax means the tax that can be transferred to another party. Indirect tax can be transferred to another party. So these are probably the tax charged on goods and services. So if government impose taxes, the producers or the business people, they can transfer that tax to the customers. There are certain scenarios where the business people cannot transfer the relevant tax to the customers. But certain taxes they can transfer. The value-added tax, maybe services taxes like. Now regarding the direct tax revenue, several categories are there. Income tax, we talk about this, the corporate tax, nation building tax. Of course, now the nation building tax is not applicable. Now it's hold. The capital gain tax may be a withholding tax. So these are the types of direct tax revenue. Now regarding the indirect tax revenue, again several types. Indirect tax, we do not have to pay indirect tax directly. So the relevant party can transfer the tax amount to another party. So these are value-added tax. Now as customers, we have to pay the value-added tax, VAT. So if we get the receipt, it includes the VAT. Like. Then custom duties, excise taxes, excise duties. So these are indirect tax revenues. Then non-tax of the government. It's again several types. Profits and dividends. Now government also receive profit and dividends. Now for example, profit and dividends from the government institutions. And charges and fees. Now we have to pay several revenue license. Every year, for example, the motor vehicle. For motor vehicle, we have to renew the revenue license. So these are charges and fees. So they are also the part of the government income, but belongs to the non-tax revenue. And interest income. You know what interest income is, and other type of income as also. Maybe revenue from lotteries. So these are the non-income tax revenue of the government. Then regarding the government expenditure, we can broadly categorize into two: recurrent expenditure and capital expenditure. Recurrent expenditure means annually we have to pay. Maybe salaries and wages, government salaries and wages, payment of interest. So these are recurrent expenditure. And capital expenditure means basically the expenditures on investments, like for example the constructions of roads, bridges, like. So these are capital expenditure. Then the monetary policy. Now monetary policy means the policy is used to control the money supply and interest rates of a country. The policies that we use to control the money supply and the interest rate of the country, or it's to control the inflation, unemployment and currency exchange rates. The main goal of monetary policy is to maintain the stability of prices of a nation's economy. So the main purpose is to control the inflation of the economy. So on behalf of the government, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, as I mentioned earlier, executes the monetary policy. And the main tool government used to control the money supply and the interest rate is the main tool that the government used to control the money supply is the interest rate. Interest rate, regarding the interest rate, central bank identifies interest rate as the stand-in facility rate. It's three types: stand-in deposit facility rate, stand-in lending facility rate and bank interest rate. Now regarding the stand-in deposit facility rate, that means this is the interest rate at which commercial banks and primary dealers invest their funds in government securities. Then SLFR means the rate charged by central bank when commercial banks and primary dealers obtain funds by pledging government securities that they hold in central bank. So it's stand-in lending facility rate. Next, bank interest rate. This is the interest rate charged by the central bank as the final loan provider from the commercial banks when they obtain loans for liquidity issues. Then change in statutory reserves requirements. Now this means SRR, we call it SRR. This is the amount of deposit that commercial bank must maintain in the central bank relating to their amount of deposits they hold. And open market operations. Open market operations means buying and selling of government securities by Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Next, change in the discount rate. This is also an important tool. Now change in discount rate means the one who have bought government securities can discount them at commercial banks before the maturity. And therefore change in discount rate plays the role of controlling money supply in the in this regard. And finally, imposing credit limits. So regarding this, the central bank has two mechanisms: the qualitative control and quantitative control. Next, as we discussed, monetary policy is a direct strategy of central bank to control the money and the interest rate of an economy. So the central bank uses both quantitative and qualitative measures, and also has authority, the central bank has the authority to control the loan amount, repayment time and security. So ultimately that authority is with the Central Bank of the Sri Lanka. Now we will see how monetary policies impact on businesses. Now say for example, when interest rate is reduced, we know as a result investment increases. Increase in investment means increase in production. When production is increased, price of goods and services as a result decreases. Decrease in increase in production and decrease in price of goods and services as a whole increase the sales revenue of business firms, and ultimately that enhances their profits. And vice versa is possible if interest rate is increased. If interest rate is increased, investment discouraged. As a result, production decreases, and as a result, prices of goods and services increases because cost of production is higher. So thus sales revenue decreases and ultimately leads to decrease the profits of the firm. Now you know, as consumers, we should have that right, consumer protection. Now consumer protection we can define as the legal cover that ensures consumer receives sufficient satisfaction for the money he or she pays. Now if we pay for a good or a service, the ultimate purpose of is to gain kind of a satisfaction. So what we gain in return should satisfy ourselves, and it should be worth for the amount we pay. So there we should have to have, if not, we should have to have a framework to fight for our rights. So that legal coverage is given by the consumer protection. Now in every country there is a legal framework for consumer protection. Now why we as consumers need kind of a legal framework or a legal protection, known as the consumer protection? Why it is needed? Now you know, compared to early days, now we have opportunity to consume abundant of goods and services. There are a number of goods and services. Some goods are quality products, some are not, low quality ones. There are number of goods and services. So we should therefore keen enough to select the best goods and services that can ultimately maximize our satisfaction. So in the market, you know, we have to face several fraud and errors. We may be cheated. So in order to have a protection, we should have to have that legal coverage. And increased malpractices in the market. Now even if how the world is developing, and despite the advancements in the technology and advancements in other aspects, malpractices also increasing. So therefore we should have to have a protection. And market complexity and free trade. Now we all live in a complex world. The complexities are everywhere, and many countries, they have free trade policies. Therefore anyone can import, export anything. There are certain barriers, but mainly the trade is free. Therefore we should have to have a protection. And the deterioration of society and culture. Now you know, globalization has its own positives as well as negatives. Despite the positives, globalization has negative impacts as well. So it harmful to a certain extent. Globalization may harmful for the survival, the society's survival and the culture. Therefore we should have to have a protection, the legal coverage. And need to increase consumer awareness to avoid environmental pollution is the last point. So due to these reasons, we need kind of a legal protection. And what are the advantages of consumer protection? The consumer protection provides advantages not only for consumers but also for businesses as well. So what are the benefits or advantages of consumer protection for consumers. So if we have consumer protection, if we have a legal coverage, that means it's a good opportunity to consume products that value to the paid money. Then being protected from the trade malpractices and ensure consumer health and protection. And legal cover, of course we have that legal cover, and ensure human friendly environment, because businesses are aware of the consumer protection. If we do engage in harmful activities, if we do any harm to the consumers, then they know they will be charged, they will be taxed. And what about the businesses? They also are having certain advantages. They increase consumer trust and loyalty. So if they are doing their businesses inconsistent with the consumer protections and consider the legal framework, then probably we as consumers would like to go to that place. So it will eventually increase the business firms' loyalty as well as trust, and increase profits. Of course, their profits will increase, and as a result they can minimize their wastage, and also it ensures the favorable business environment. So these are the advantages of consumer protection for both consumers and producers or the businesses. Then consumer rights. First four rights were introduced by the former President John F. Kennedy, USA, and the rest or the last four rights are introduced by Consumer International. So we'll see a quick look one by one. Right to safety. Right to safety means products should not cause any harm to their users. So it ensures the safety. The right to be informed. Right to be informed means, now you know, firms should provide sufficient and appropriate information to consumers regarding their products and services in order to make right choices. Therefore, we should be informed all the necessary information of the product and the service. And right to choose. Of course, as consumers, we have our own right to choose what we need among varieties of goods and services. And right to be heard. That means we as consumers has right to voice complaints and concerns about products and services. Then right to satisfaction of basic needs. So of course it is obvious we should have right to satisfy our basic needs and wants, basic needs. And right to redress. That means we have right to receive claims and compensations if we are cheated. So that possibility is there. And right to consumer education. Again, that means we should have to have right to increase our knowledge and skills regarding the choices, regarding in making choices. And finally to right to live in a healthy environment. So it's obvious we have that right. Then regarding the consumer responsibilities. There are 5 main responsibilities. The critical awareness. Critical awareness means responsibility of being alert and question more regarding the prices, quality, the sizes, varieties, choices. So we have that responsibility. So we should ask, we should be alert with all these things before we make our choice. And active participation. That means it's our responsibility of being active or of being assertive. That's to ensure that you get a fair deal as a consumer. And social concern. Social concern means it's a responsibility to be aware of the impacts impact of your consumption to other people and the society. You should have that responsibility. When we consume a good or a service, we should be responsible. That should not harm to anyone. And environmental concern, of course, our consumption should not harm to the environment. That means responsibility of being aware of the environmental consequences of your consumption. And corruption. That means it's a responsibility, not corruption, cooperation. So cooperation means the responsibility to join hands and raise voice collectively as consumers. Collectively as consumers. So these are main responsibilities of a good or a responsible consumer. Then finally, the last section, the government institutions, the role of government institutions in consumer protection. So what government institutions can help to protect consumers? So these are some of the government institutions that work for consumer protection in Sri Lanka. So that's all about the interaction between government and businesses. So I hope this will give a good insight on the topic, and thank you very much.